everyone. So I actually wanted to start off by just, thanking our players, coaches, football staff for all the time and energy that they put into this current season, or excuse me, this last season. Look, we didn't get the job done this year, and we're all, disappointed that we didn't meet our own internal expectations, and that we're not playing meaningful football this weekend. Ultimately, we're just too inconsistent in really all three phases, throughout the season. And again, we're all disappointed that we didn't reach our goals this year. That all being said, we do believe that we have a lot of, core pieces on the roster, within football operations that would allow us to, have success moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, just to talk a little bit about what the next few weeks will look like for us. Really internally, we'll really review everything. We'll do a kind of a postmortem from the season and review everything across the roster. Our cap and cash situation, across football operations. Kevin will review the coaching staff and everything that we did schematically, with really the goal for improving in 2022. We all wish that 2022 could start next month, because I think the toughest part of today is the fact that we're not going to play meaningful football games for another 9 months. And I think that leaves a pretty sour taste in all of our mouths. And that's something that we really want to work hard to eradicate and again, make sure that we're playing meaningful football this time of year. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
Thank you very much, AB. Our first question will be from Tom Withers.
Sorry. Hey, Rob, thank you. Andrew, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Tom.
I don't wish for the season to start next month. We need a little break here. Hey, first and foremost, Baker Mayfield. Do you expect him to be your starting quarterback next season?
Yeah, we fully expect Baker to be our starter and bounce back. So I think Kevin mentioned this yesterday. So yes.
In your exit meeting with him, can you give us a sense of what you went over, what you would like to see him work on? Obviously, health is paramount, but beyond that, Andrew, what strides would you like to see him make in the offseason?
Yeah, Tom, it's a good question. I think respectfully, any kind of one-on-one meeting that I would have with a player, that would remain between the player and myself. Generally speaking, we're looking forward to Baker, obviously getting healthy in the off season. And then putting good work, through the spring and with his coaches for, having the type of season that we know we can have moving forward.
Thank you, Tom. Mary Kay Cabot is next.
Yes, Andrew, you guys have come under, some fire for not shutting Baker down sooner and, letting him heal up the shoulder and starting Case and seeing if you guys couldn't maybe win a few more games that way. So we've heard Kevin talk about it, but what's your kind of view on that whole approach this season?
Yeah, I think Kevin did mention this yesterday and I talked about this a little bit at the bye. Medically cleared, the player feels good, can perform everything that's asked of him and required of him in practice. And, Baker was our starting quarterback. He was going to play if he was ready to go. And, I don't think it's any more, complicated than that.
Do you have any regrets about when you look back? I mean, now that everybody's talking so much about the shoulder, was it worse than maybe he led on to you guys, or did it turn out to be, in hindsight, maybe something should have happened differently?
Yeah, look, I think, probably any season where you don't reach your goals, you look back and examine everything. We felt good about the information that we had throughout the year and on hand. I think, the reality of it is we all wish that we and, everybody across the team were able to perform better and allow us to reach the playoffs this year.
Thanks, Mary Kay. Cam Justice is up.
Hey, Andrew.
Thank you.
You talked about before looking at the body of work for your players when you're making decisions about the futures of the team. When a player's playing through an injury over the course of a few games or even a whole season, what's your organizational standard, for the data that comes into that body of work? How do you benefit from seeing a player handling it? Does the data get an asterisk next to it? How do you weigh everything out?
Every situation is unique, Cam. based on the injury, obviously the role that the player faces. I think the reality of it is that you get to late in the year and really everybody's fighting through something, certainly of different severity. I don't mean to minimize one injury versus another, but so it really is on a case by case basis, and you try and take all the information into account and make a fair judgment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. Let's go to Scott Patrick.
Hey, Andrew, I get another Baker question for you. So how do you process the struggles that he had this year? And then what gives you the confidence that he will be able to bounce back in 2022 and give you what you need?
I think it's easy to forget at this point of the year that what we've seen with Baker over the past several years. I think obviously he had his most productive season in this offense under Kevin, just really as early as last year. Look, I think we've been with Baker for a long period at this time. At this point, we know his work ethic, we know his drive. We've seen him as a talented passer in this league, and we're looking forward to him getting healthy and continue to make improvements. And we expect him to bounce back next year.
Do you feel any need to bring in somebody to push him at that position?
So Scott, I think I've mentioned this before in terms of how we look at the offseason. We don't go looking to it and say, hey, we're just going to target shoot certain positions. We scout and look at player availability as if we have an expansion team. So the way we go about adding competition or improving the talent base in the roster is largely, maybe not wholly, but largely independent of who's currently on the team.
Thank you, Scott. Dale Ryder, go ahead.
Yeah, Andrew, I think we've covered the Baker thing here. So I want to ask you just one of the themes that came out of a lot of the player interviews yesterday was the relationship between the offensive players and the defensive players. And not to say that there was internal fighting or anything like that, but just a theme seemed to form with guys talking about the camaraderie and that type of thing. So organizationally, how do you improve that? Because when you look at this season, I mean, there was a stark contrast between the two units. The defense ascended as the season went on, and the offense seemed to descend. So just when you look at that situation, how do you improve that next year so you don't have a repeat?
So a couple of things along those lines, Daryl. It's a good question. I think a year ago I might have mentioned that, generally speaking, every year is unique in the NFL. And the big reason is because regardless of if you make it to the Super Bowl or you're, the 32nd team in football, every team has a fair amount of significant roster turnover. I think it's on average maybe a third per year. So what comes with that is constantly, reinforcing the team culture, karate, because you really do have to work at it from the beginning at every year, because there are a number of guys who won't have been with you the previous season. Now, that being said, I think what you can see when you're not having results is, frustration, right? Everybody puts a ton of time and energy and effort into this thing, and it's frustrating for everybody if you don't reach your goals, which we didn't this season. But that being said, I think shared success, performance, work ethic, like that's really the goal, right? To improve that and make sure that we hit that mark. That's first and foremost, as opposed to anything. And I think that shared success oftentimes, leads to, the chemistry and working relationships. So that's really the focus first and foremost as we go into the next few weeks.
And something else that popped up yesterday, John Johnson had mentioned this, and I know you guys have invested a lot of resources in the player development type of thing with nutritionists, sports science, and things like that. But he did bring it up, and he mentioned maybe you guys should bring in a yoga instructor to help with flexibility, to eliminate some of these soft tissue injuries. I just want to kind of get your take on the prevention of those injuries and what steps you guys can do organizationally, because they really did hit you hard this year to, improve what you already have in place.
Yeah, no, probably two separate things. So John and I actually talked about this, actually yesterday before he left. So you're right. We have made some pretty significant investments within football operations, within player development and sports science. I think the reality of it is, Daryl, with really what we've seen the past 2 years with the tier limits because of COVID protocols in place, you actually do have to make some cuts is probably the wrong word, but probably some decisions, particularly with certain outside practitioners that you wouldn't necessarily normally have those restrictions in a year where you're not playing in a pandemic. So because of those limits, some of the services that we would typically bring in out of the building, we haven't been able to in probably a year or two, but it's something that's certainly top of mind for us. Every year we do go through an injury, and particularly a soft tissue injury audit. And I think our medical and performance groups are pretty good at staying on the cutting edge of those things. But as you alluded to, look, teams that can stay healthy, that's a huge competitive advantage in our sport. And it's something that we want to make sure we're doing everything in our power to do.
Thank you, Daryl. Fred Greetham is next.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for your time. You've talked in the past about roster evaluation all across the board as being your top job. My question is back to quarterback. Do you feel it's your job to look at every option, and if you can upgrade that position, you do so, or is the downside too much risk that word gets out that you are looking into that?
Probably the simple answer to the question is my job is to assemble the best team possible and make sure that we're in a position to compete consistently for the division, to be in the playoffs, and ultimately win a championship. And that's something that we'll strive to do every year.
Thank you, Fred. We'll go to Nate Ulrich.
Hey, Andrew, good to see you. Two quick things on Baker. Will the expectation be on your end that, you guys just move forward with this 5th-year option and see what happens, next season? And then the second thing I wanted to ask you about Baker was, he did publicly criticize play calling twice in the last month. So have you and Kevin heard the things you need to hear with him in your conversations that make you feel like this relationship is going to work moving forward with you guys committing to him the way you have today?
Nate, I probably addressed this a little bit earlier, right? Like I said, we fully expect Baker to bounce back. In terms of any conversations that would happen with me or Baker or Kevin and Baker, really those will stay there. I don't have any concerns in terms of relationship or anything along those lines. I think it's pretty natural to have discussions around scheme as you go into any off season, and those discussions have happened and will continue to happen with the appropriate parties.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Tony Grossi, go ahead.
All right, Andrew, I have two. Number one, directly, are you comfortable playing Baker in 2022 without a new contract?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable. We have a lot of guys that will have gone into their final year or something along those lines. I mean, that's not something that really goes into the calculus for us. Every year you'll have guys that are on expiring deals.
Lame duck quarterback, is it uncomfortable?
Yeah, I don't know that I would categorize it that way, Tony. I mean, again, you have a number of players across positions that are entering the final years of their deals. So that's not something that's really top of mind for me.
Thanks, Tony. We'll go to Matt Fontana.
Yeah, AB, I know you've mentioned kind of looking over the whole roster. It could be chicken or the egg with Baker's injury, but do you need to see more out of the receiving core, and is that a priority to bring some talent in there this offseason?
Yeah, it's a good question, Matt. Again, I think that's really across the roster. That's what the next couple of weeks are going to be for. Look, I told you guys at the bye week that I thought that our passing offense was too inconsistent at that point, and that I think remains to be the case as we exit the year. So we'll pull it apart and look at it, and obviously make the necessary changes and improvements that are needed, whether it's externally, internally, or schematically.
And then you had great success again this year with a lot of one-year deals. Anthony Walker, I know Jadeveon Clowney's probably the biggest one, and Malik Jackson. Is it fair to say that that's something that we could see more out of in the future, or the one-year deals on some veteran guys?
I wouldn't maybe read too much into that, Matt. I think it really depends on what the contractual status is for players elsewhere on your roster. And again, where you have where you have your cap dollars invested. So that's a big part of our cap and cash planning in the upcoming weeks, and you obviously try and match it to player availability as well.
Thank you, Matt. Jeff Shadell will have our next question.
Hey, I'm going to ask you a draft question. Do you think spending a draft pick on a kicker, is that something that you would consider, and how much do you think you have to really look at that position?
Would consider anything, Jeff. My reaction to that isn't any hard and fast rule. I think it probably depends on the player, and I think it depends on other ways that you can acquire talent at the position. But no, I wouldn't rule it out.
Thanks, Jeff. Ashley Bastock, you're up.
Hey, Andrew, I wanted to ask about Greg Newsome and JOK. I mean, do you feel like they had the rookie seasons, like living up to the hype, especially JOK? You guys aggressively traded up to make sure you got him in last year's draft. So just how you think they did this year and how you see their futures going forward here.
Yeah, I think both those guys, they played well. They grew as the season progressed. I think there's still a lot that each guy can improve. And we've obviously had that conversation with both individuals as they enter the off season. Good rookie year, but they're going off on into the next several months with targeted areas that they can work on so that they can take a step moving forward and be a big piece of what helps us get to the playoffs in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Dan Lobby is next.
Hey, Andrew, I've got two for you.
Okay.
The first is that there was a report yesterday that Kwesi is getting an interview request in Chicago, I believe it was. So I guess, first of all, you're granting that request. And then secondly, how important is it for you to see guys from your front office go on and have those opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dan. And I will tell you that I am incredibly excited and proud of both Kwesi and Glenn for, having the opportunity to interview for, one of the 31 other franchises. Of course, we will always grant requests. Now, again, in fairness, not that it's our choice to deny it, but regardless, we're thrilled when we have people from our organization that you have the chance to interview for one of these opportunities, and I know those guys will represent themselves well. And any owner who was looking to hire a general manager, those guys will do a phenomenal job. I'm just glad they're interviewing for an NFC team so I can root for them if they get it.
And then I do have another Baker question, and this just has to do with, him playing on that final year of his contract. There could be the assumption that maybe that there isn't a belief that he could be a guy long-term for this organization. Is it fair to wonder if this is sort of another prove it year for Baker going into that fifth year?
I think the reality of it is any of us who work in the NFL, every year's a prove it year. To the contract question in general, Dan, I think you guys probably know me well enough that I kind of march to the beat of my own drum in terms of whatever contract precedents are out there. So we'll deal with each situation on an individual basis.
Thanks, Dan. We'll go to Zach Jackson.
Hey, Andrew, you told us at the bye week that you expected to see Baker's best play over the final month of the season. What did you see in that final month?
Yeah, I think in fairness, right, misses 2 games, plays 1 game well, 1 game probably not so well, and then probably the 3rd game that he played gets COVID, out 2 weeks, is there the day of the game. So, certainly those 5 games didn't go the way that we hoped or anticipated, but we expect them to bounce back.
And I think Cam asked you about JOK and Greg Newsome. How about Hudson and Schwartz? I mean, I think those guys were always developmental players, but what did you see, and what do you need to see from those guys going forward?
Yeah, I think for all rookies, or I should say maybe for the overwhelming majority of rookies, and certainly within our class, we saw progress, expect them to take a step forward. I think, James really got baptism by fire throughout this year. And I actually think he came along nicely and particularly ended his season in a really strong manner against the Cincinnati game. I think it's tough for a guy who's a former D lineman, 4th round pick, played left tackle, right tackle for us. But it's good experience. I think Anthony, probably the the best thing for him was he battled a lot of adversity this year, right? You had the injury in camp, came back, fought his way into kind of a part-time role, had the concussion, middle of the year that obviously kept him out for several weeks, and really kind of battled his way back to get some meaningful steps at the end. So those guys have a year under their belt now of NFL life. Good conversations with both before they left yesterday. They are highly focused, know the areas that they need to improve, and we're looking forward to seeing what progress they can make when they come back during the spring.
Thank you, Zach. Mary Kay Cabot is next.
Yes, Andrew, can you address, speaking of coming under some heat, Kevin Stefanski took a lot of heat for the play calling and the process of things this season. And so just wondering, will you guys as an organization address whether that's the right way to go going forward? What did you feel about the play calling? And do you sometimes wonder if maybe he wouldn't be better just overseeing the whole operation? What's your view on all that?
Yeah, I think, as what I, mentioned a little bit earlier, Mary Kay, in terms of like looking at everything, because you have to be, we really do have to go through everything, because we didn't meet our, our level of expectations this year. That all being said, feel good about Kevin as a play caller. I think that's something that is one of his strengths. There are a lot of things that we'll need to improve over the next several months, and it really all has to work together. I don't think it's any one thing or any silver bullet, and that's why we're going to tear it apart and plot the best path to go. Whether it's personnel wise, schematically wise, or operationally, with an eye towards improvement in 2022.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Kay. Jake Trotter has our next question.
Yeah, Andrew, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but can you expand on what you like about Baker as the leader, as the quarterback of the Browns moving forward, and his fit within this team?
Yeah, I think Baker, he's team oriented, he's a competitor, he's super tough, and he truly wants what's best for the team, and really to take the steps that he needs to improve to become the quarterback that we know that he can become. So guys that are self-motivated, they're team oriented, and they're tough. You certainly like that profile across any position.
So just to clarify, from what you said earlier, if an opportunity came up to pursue another quarterback, are you saying that's not something you would be interested in, given that you have Baker under contract through next season, or is it too soon to say because you haven't done your evaluations yet, and you don't necessarily know what those opportunities might even be?
Yeah, I know there's a ton of speculation out there. I'm not really going to get into that, Jake. I think I've been fairly straightforward here on this.
Thanks, Jake. Let's go to Scott Petrick.
Andrew, regarding Jadeveon Clowney, how did you think he fit in his first year here? See a guy you want back, and then the fact that he played so well, will that make it tougher, you think, to re-sign him?
I think JD had a really good season for us. Was very productive, run and pass, disruptive player. I think he paired nicely with the guys that we had up front, obviously with Miles being at the forefront. And he had a good year. I think he did the things that we envisioned when we signed him, and so good season. Fit in nicely for us, and the next several weeks we'll see kind of what the future holds with all our guys across the roster.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. We have time for one more question. Nate Ulrich, go to you.
Hey, Andrew, I just kind of along those lines. Now this guy is under contract, but I just want to know what you thought of Denzel Ward's season, what that could mean for him, if you view him as a cornerstone type guy that you want to, try to keep longer.
Yeah, I think Denzel put together a fine year. He made a number of really big plays for us at critical moments in the season. Obviously, we know he's a local kid, drafted and developed here, and he put together a really strong season for us, Nate. So we're pleased with that.
Okay, and Jarvis Landry has been the key guy for you guys over the years. Obviously, he has a big contract here. What is the outlook for Jarvis as it relates to, being a member of the Browns?
I mean, I think everybody on this call knows how much respect that we have for Jarvis Landry, and really what he's meant for our team and organization over the past several years. He's been a productive player for us, really since the day that we traded for him, and he's been really a key piece in terms of how the team and organization has evolved over the last several years.